Welcome back to the Pilzno Work Inspired podcast, and it's exciting to be back together again. Tzvi broker here with Rabbi Gerzi, and discussing topics in Parnasa that are really on our hearts and minds. And the last time we left off with Gerzi discussing how, as Jews, it's not our goal to be poor. It's not our goal to be poor, and it's so important when we hear stories. We spoke about the stories from tzaddikim, about how they lived very meagerly and still lived very dedicated lives to Torah and Avodas Hashem, to take that in context and to really understand, as we really unpackaged last time, we need to take a look at our generation and understand the abundance that we're facing and find a way to be able to harness that towards Avodas Hashem. And the truth is that it's a good time to continue this conversation post-Pesach. I was thinking about this over the Chag, how you can imagine being there on that night of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and the Jews they've been in Avdus, and they're so ready to leave. Paro screams, and it's echoed throughout all of Mitzrayim, free, free, free. They're like, let's go, quick, Korban Pesach. And Moshe Rabbeinu was like, stop, Yidden, stop. Go get your money, go get your gold. And he almost had to force them, and it's an interesting thing, why was it that Hashem needed Am Yisrael, needed us to be able to leave Mitzrayim with our pockets full? And then again, it's funny because even though our pockets were full, then we had to find new pockets to fill up again after Kriyas Yamsuf. There seemed to be this desire from Hashem that we should have money, and it seems that poor is not really on the agenda. But what I wanted to really get to, we mentioned last time, was this concept that I hear from discussing with people about living comfortably. People want to live comfortably. What does that actually mean? Because when I think about comfortable, it somehow always comes back in my mind. The story I heard growing up about that one of the tzaddikim, I think it was Rav Moshe Feinstein, that is in his older age, they wanted to install an air conditioner into his apartment, and he didn't want one. And when they asked him why, he said, because he said, right now I've been able to learn well even without an air conditioner. And if now you're going to put in an air conditioner, of course, I'm sure he sat in air conditioning, from time to time, but he knew that his body would start to become used to that. That would become his new norm. And then if he didn't have air conditioning, so then he wouldn't be able to learn. He wouldn't be able to daven as well without the air conditioning. So he wanted to make sure not to become too comfortable, because he understood that becoming too comfortable could end up making him dependent on that comfortability. So what would you have to share about that in terms of how we look for comfort, but the danger of comfort? How does it all work out?
There's another story that comes to mind as well, and that's with Reb Chaim. The Reb Chaim wanted to put in air conditioning for Reb Chaim, and in Bnei Brak, a lot of the chevra
over there.
A lot of the chevra, they don't use the electricity on Shabbos. So he would say that during the week he would have air conditioning, and then when it comes to Shabbos he wouldn't have air conditioning. So during the week he would be comfortable, he would get used to a certain standard of living that was equated to being more comfortable, and then when it comes to Shabbos he's going to be less comfortable. So he didn't get it completely. I don't know, I think it's a very interesting matzav, because on one hand, just reflecting upon it and thinking about it, what is comfortable? What is comfortable? So comfortable is very relative. Comfortable, what we are used to, it's all very, very relative. And one person's comfort could be another person's discomfort. I'll give you a prime example. When driving, so I may be in the car with somebody, my wife's driving, and she likes the air conditioning on her, and she finds that very pleasurable. It's hot, she likes the air conditioning on her. I don't like the air conditioning on me. I close it. You have that little chupchik. I close it so the air conditioning is not on me. I make sure I like the window being open.
It's one of those things they don't really check out well enough in Shidduchim, I think. Like the air conditioning, or maybe they do these days. Like the air conditioning on and off.
So like what does it mean to be comfortable? And I think it's important to understand that Shas and Poskim navigate this tension. There's a number of passages in the Talmud, number of Maimar Chazal that come to mind. One of them is when there was one particular Rav, and he tells his son, take this pouch of money to a particular person who they were once wealthy and now they lost their money. So he goes and he takes the money, and then when he comes back he says, Pa, he says, Abba, he says, I don't understand. He said the guy lost all his money. When we're walking along, he's spritzing rose water in front of him. Really? Rose water? Take him another 400 zuz. Take him another. This guy's meant to be poor. And halach l'maisa, there's several Maimar Chazal like this, where you have an individual who lost their money, and they are to be supported in a way of where they were before with their money, from tzedakah money. So it's interesting that Torah navigates human experience in such a way that an individual needs to be supported within reason on where they were coming from before. So it is just the takeaway. The takeaway is that Torah is sensitive to this reality, to create what we define as comfort. It's sensitive to this reality that we are to live whatever it means in a comfortable way. And if that comfortability is now taken away, for whatever reason, tzedakah has to support them in where they were before, so they could live that lifestyle of comfort of where they were before.
Wow, it sounds as if from what you're sharing is that we find that the Torah understands comfort as being a need. It's not,
Yes.
they always talk about, what's a need and what's a bonus, what's an extra, what's not necessary. And what we're seeing is that even, not just within oneself, but we see even to the extent of when it comes to other people and how much the tzedakah is going to be used to support other people, we say, hey, this person's comfort for them is defined as a need.
So it's interesting. Is another way of reframing it, is giving tzedakah on a higher level an extra? Is it considered extra, or is it considered exactly their need and want?
Right.
Like and it seems to be Hashem Yisbarach respects our needs, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, within the wisdom of the Torah, protects a person's needs.
Right.
Protects a person's dignity and comfort. So it's not considered, even though if I'm dealing with tzedakah and I don't know this sugya, I may think, listen, for God's sakes, it's like this guy, he had millions, okay, he's got no food in the fridge, and I have to give him steak, let me give him cereal, let me give him some bread. But no, the halacha doesn't consider it as extra.
Wow. Yeah, I know definitely, I've had those thoughts myself. Sometimes, when someone comes and he's collecting, and it seems like, he's doing quite well. You think he's, it's a fancy cell phone, and all these different sort of types of things. And the question is what's considered to be a need, and halacha defines that so much so that it would even direct our decisions when it comes to distributing public funds. Another one that I still haven't found someone that's given an explanation that really spoken to me, but I guess we spoke about ben adam lamakom when it comes to we spoke about ben adam lechavero. When it comes to ben adam lamakom, it's in Chagiga. The Gemara in Chagiga, when it discusses the mitzvah of Olei Regel, it's very fascinating. It speaks about different people, from what chiyuv, who has a chiyuv to go up to the Beis HaMikdash, for Olei Regel, and it speaks about how the Istanis, who's this person who's more sensitive to his comforts. He's more sensitive that it's not comfortable for him to be able to walk barefoot, in the Azar in the Beis HaMikdash, that he's pater, that he has a patur from doing Olei Regel, and I saw this. I first took a really, a second look at this, and that's mind-boggling. Here we're talking about Olei Regel. No, Olei Regel, which is like, halavai, we should be zeicha to do it.
Amen.
And here this is something which is so fundamental, that we need to get this, this dosage of Olei Regel 3 times a year. And here's this guy, I would have been like, okay, buddy,
get on with it.
Get on with it, practice at home, first thick socks, then thin socks, then no socks. But This is Beis HaMikdash over here. And it's not like, okay, this guy's a Russia, or this guy's, it's like, okay, Pater. Fascinating. It's very fascinating.
I think, again, you have to hunt around to find out what quenches your thirst. But I think it comes back to this nukuda of recognizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Torah, really takes into consideration the individual's needs. And it's something very profound to think about, because if the Torah didn't say that, we could miss this.
What do you mean by that?
If the Torah didn't tell us the guy's potter, and he's a normal guy, he's just an istinus, he's potter. So we would think, as Rabbi Tzvi said, like, just get on with it. Get a move on, get on with it. Everything is about comfort. But in certain segments of our normative living, yes, there is this deep sensitivity, at times tension, and it will dictate a certain ruling al pi halacha. So we wouldn't have chapped that. I don't think we would have chapped that. I think we would have said, Eila l'regel. Eila l'regel is the most important thing in the world. Of course you must go. So Gemara is coming to tell us, just be sensitive to another paradigm that exists, another layer of sensitivity that exists within the world of Bein Adam leChaveroi. And to understand that this is an opinion in Chazal. And that manifests and that ripple effects throughout all different areas. It's always a battle. It's always a battle because, as you know, in our work, in the chaburas, not just the work-inspired chaburas, but our Avodas Hashem chaburas, we push ourselves. We bedafka choose to engage in discomfort. Cold showers, intermittent fasting, because that's where growth occurs. Growth occurs where we push ourselves, where in our Avodas Hashem chaburas we have monthly avodas, and it's not always comfortable. It's not always getting up. I think somebody's getting up at Nate's every day now, getting up to daven Nate's. So is that comfortable? No. So there's this interesting dichotomy here, because on one side of the coin, Chazal is sharing with us that in the realms of Chagiga Istanis, or these many other ksuvas and many other places in Chazal where we speak about tzedakah to match where that person was. Yet, on the other hand, growth only occurs through stepping out of your comfort zone. So there is this interesting tension. On one hand, you have tzaddikim, Rav Uri Shishela, one of the Hasidic masters. He was poor as it was, yet he never went to sleep with money in his house. It was the same by the Divrei Chaim as well. Divrei Chaim did not sleep when he knew there was money in his house. He distributed the funds, even at the expense of his wife cheppering him. We've got no money in the house and you're giving away the money? So we do hear stories of such a nature. And it's interesting. We hear stories as well, Chofetz Chaim, but Dafka the Chofetz Chaim, he wanted to support his family. He went without, but he supported his family. He made sure there was Parnassus Fasemes, Zeda. He is well supported. So Tzaddikim, they thought about themselves in a certain way, yet in regards of the comfort of others, they were very makpid.
Wow. Yeah, it's fascinating that that sort of type of tension that you just mentioned, because I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up, because we're told, especially from a place of Musar, we're told like, no, like you have to push yourself, and we know, even in, the Havdil in the secular world, there's the idea of stepping out of one's comfort zone, and it would seem that even that language, out of one's comfort zone, is that the comfort zone is something which is holding us back, right? And therefore we want to step out of comfort, and especially in today's society where, everything, everything is being pushed to make it more comfortable. I'm laughing because one of my kids, it was just, to check something up, to see something, when a bus was coming, and he just loves the fact that instead of having to push a button, he can just talk. It's like, hey Google, we have all of our virtual servants, the slavers of once yore, we have them today.
I think the difference is, just thinking about this, I think the difference is, with the Istanis, they didn't choose. in regards to tzedakah and what comfort is, they didn't choose to become poor. They weren't ready. You have to. I think that's the point. That's the axiomatic truth here, is that you have to choose to step into the discomfort. If you don't choose to step into the discomfort, then alpi those sugyas, it goes a certain direction.
I see. Meaning, if a person is in that situation, let's say, for example, the istinus, where that's where he is, right, and he's feeling discomfortable. So from our perspective of how we look at him towards halacha or in tzedakah, we respect that need for comfort as a need for him. And then within ourselves, we can choose at a certain point, as maybe, let's say, that story with Rabbi Moshe, where he realized for himself right now, I don't want to bring on the extra level of comfort. He chose that he didn't want to do that. But that's something which needs to be chosen. If a person needs to be honest with themselves to know, this is a comfort which I need, right? This is something that I need. This is something that would help.
Rock the boat. Sometimes it could rock the boat a little bit too much, that now other areas of life decreases. It's the same Gemara Tanis when there's again another sugi in Shas looking for the shidduchim, that you look for the shidduchim on the similar ramah. In regards to the matches, the maritonial matches, they're on a similar level of wealth, of smartness, of etc., that there is this sensitivity. Now, what would be if this istinus, this person who's so sensitive to every, discomfort, so they're potted to go up to the Beis Hamikdash, but what would happen if they turned around and said, actually, you know what, I'm going for it. I'm going to go for it. What would be if somebody who's being supported from tzedakah would turn around and say, you know what, I know the halacha says azoi, says like this, but don't just give me, instead of 20,000 shekel a month, give me 15,000 shekel a month. So it seems to be even within that sugya that would change. But what you just said now, that self-knowledge is vital. That self-knowledge, what are my wants and needs? And what are the wants and needs of the ones around me?
Right.
And my wife's great-great-grandfather, he was a nista, he was a tzaddik, unbelievable tzaddik, a rav tzaddik, and he fasted from week to week, and he had many chumras, and again, that was his level. He was prepared to enter that realm. And there's a couple of stories where one of his kids wanted to do the same, and his father wouldn't let him. And he says, because the discomfort would then create a pagam on your emunah.
Oh, wow.
The discomfort that we're speaking about in this particular area, it will hinder your faith in the divine.
Wow. Okay, so it sounds like that like what you just said, that having that self-knowledge is the key, and that there is an idea, and we've seen this, and for anyone who's tuning in, I'm sure you've seen as well in the Svarim and heard in Shuvas this idea that a person should try to work on not needing as much, but we need to be very honest with ourselves to make sure that is not going to end up hurting us, in the long run. And just one of the chazal that we've spoken about in the past, and in the Beis Medrash program, we went into depth about this in the Gemara that speaks about those things that are marchiv the das of a person. That there are things in a person's life can help a person greater level of consciousness, of awareness, and open himself up towards spirituality. And you expect meditation for sure,
and praying all day,
kivrei tzadikim,
and learning Torah all day. But no, the Gemara doesn't say. What does the Gemara say?
It says to have a nice apartment, a nice house.
What?
A nice looking wife.
You must be mistaken.
And the last one is to have, a nice, appeasing couch, desk, table, car.
Okay,
not just any phone, but the more upgraded phone.
You must be misreading this Gemara. Really, the Gemara says that?
It seems no one didn't see anything before and try to say that there was a mistake or the Gerzi. But it's fascinating, right? Because it's like, okay, well, what does this have to do? Where is this on the program? But that's exactly the point, is that there is a reality of the fact that these things help people. And if they help us, and if it helps you, so then don't feel bad about it, but this is something to consider getting, and it's not an extra for you, it's a need.
Yeah. When Tosfos would sit to learn, one of our rabbis, one of the sets of rabbis, one particular individual, when he would sit to learn, do you remember what he had in front of him on the table?
Like a bowl of coins.
A bowl of coins, a pouch of coins. Pouch of coins, why? So his mind was settled. Oh, I've got money in front of me, I could sit and I can study.
Wow.
It's such a deep insight into understanding human experience.
Right.
This is
It's a respect for saying, first, it's Aleph is like an awareness of what is it that I need, and B is I can respect that. Hashem respects it in me. We can see when it comes to Isness, he says, okay. When it comes to tzedakah, he says, okay, so that I recognize that something within myself, that this comfort, right, or having those coins in front of me is something that would help me. So it's like, do it. Like, nice couch will help you. Do it.
I took a Yid to Rav Steinman. A long time ago, I took a Jew to Rav Steinman in Bnei Brak. First of all, this person, who's a wealthy person, was shocked when he walked into Rav Steinman's home. Everything's falling apart, the paint's peeling off the wall, and this person wanted to give Rav Steinman a wad of money, and he says, this is for you, and he says, no, this is for tzedakah. And he says, but you're the leader of the generation. And Rav Steinman said, listen, if somebody would come to my house who's sitting and learning and really working on building themselves spiritually, and they'll see I have a nice house, they will feel uncomfortable. But when they come to my house and they can see this is how I live, then they can do the same.
Wow.
And Reb Chaim, he lived in like a 2-bedroom home. Anyone who ever went to Reb Chaim lived in a small 2-bedroom home. That's where he lived. That's where he stayed for the same reason. But this individual, who's a wealthy individual, so he had a question. He said to Rav Steinman, do I buy the $5 watch or do I buy the $5,000 watch? What do I buy? And if I buy the $5 watch, I can give, 4,000, what would it be, $4,995 to charity. What do I get? Rav Steinman, after speaking to him, said to him, you have to get the $5,000 watch.
Wow.
The guy almost fell off his seat.
Right. It's just a sensitivity to understanding that people are different. And I think the connection between what we've just been speaking about, that we spoke about how it plays out in Ben Adam la'atzmo, within those things that we buy, Ben Adam l'makom. We saw the situation of the Isnus and the Beis Hamikdash, Ben Adam l'chavero. When it comes to tzedakah, what comes to mind is this teaching, Rabbi Akiva, this time of year, it's very much in people's minds of ahavta l'recha kamocha, that we should love our friend like ourselves. So one of the tzaddikim explained that in order for us to love another person, we first need to love ourselves. Because if we don't and I think it plays out beautifully here, because if we don't respect our own wants or our own comfortabilities that we need as needs, so then when it comes to the other person, we're going to be like, he doesn't really need it. He doesn't really need it. He'll be okay with less. While really maybe that poor person does need it, or even more relevant, when it comes to our own families, and that's something, that I wanted to, ask you about, because, when we're living by ourselves, then we can make choices. Once a person has a spouse and a person has children, so they may for themselves realize, for me, this brand's good enough. For me, this kugel's good enough, but this size apartment, this car is good enough. But then, what if my spouse feels, well, that's not good enough for me? Or the kids pipe up and say, hey, but what about that's not good enough for me? So then, where does that boundary come in terms of respecting their comfortabilities as their needs, when they may not necessarily be needs for us, and how that's going to impact making decisions?
So I think it goes back to the, to the Avodah of the Sfas Emes, to the Avodah of the Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim did not need much. Yet, it seems to be, and I've heard this from students of the Chofetz Chaim, some of my teachers were students of the Chofetz Chaim, and I heard this from them, that he himself didn't need much, but he was sensitive and he made sure that his wife and kids had what they needed. So his wife wanted something like a nice room in the house. He gave it to her. The Sfas Emes was the same. And the Sfas Emes, the family were wealthy. He didn't go with much. His wife and kids. Yeah. And I can tell you a number of different stories. I mentioned with my wife's great-grandfather that he was not a man of means, but he was very sensitive and very cautious that his wife had nice clothes, his wife had jewelry, and he himself wore and had the same clothing and even the food that he ate. I think he only ate leftovers.
Really?
Yeah. So for him, that's the way he wanted to live. But for his family and for certain members of his family, he did not expect that. And his level, I think that's actually even more impressive. When somebody can be sensitive to the people in their home. What are their wants? What are their needs? I took somebody once to a parent whose child was having learning difficulties. The child was having learning difficulties, and we went to a certain Gadol B'Torah, and this Gadol B'Torah, he said to the parent, make sure you let your kid's hair grow out a little bit. Make sure they have a slight hairstyle, because I see that that's good for them. Make sure that you get more expensive clothes. And they said, what about the other kids? The other kids, chab. The other kids, they get it. They get it. They get it. It's the same, this, okay, we're not speaking about sometimes members of the family, they go a different derech.
Right.
Not necessarily following the derech. So, people are worried. What about the rest of the kids? The kids know. The kids know. And this Rabbi, he was a Hasidic Rabbi, Baruch Shem, very close to him, he said, make sure, let this boy grow out his hair. Let him wear, get slightly more expensive clothes. And it's interesting because that had been a tension point in the house. The ramifications of that. But the Rebbe was spot on, and he let, the parents let the hair grow, and the kids started to come and feel a sense of belonging, feel a sense of connection, under proper guidance. And I would say, with everything that we've discussed today, I think it's really important, Aselach Harav, you have to have a mentor, you have to have somebody who knows you, somebody who you can have that nutritious conversation. You have to have a few friends that you can bounce this off to know, because subjectively we never know. We never know what's my need, what's my want. What does it say by Rabbi Yisrael Salant? By Rabbi Yisrael Salant, my ruchnius is the other person's gashmius.
Right. Meaning it's their gashmius is my ruchnius.
Their gashmius.
Yeah, meaning their gashmius is my ruchnius, and therefore, to look at another person who it may seem, what is that important, for that person to have it? If that's a need for them, right? You may see that as being gashmius. For me, that's my ruchnius, is to be able to give to another person.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very beautiful teaching. So I think just to sum up what we've done here today, opened up about this question about financial comfortability. What does that mean? How does the Torah view it? And we've seen from different perspectives, from Ben Adam leChavero, Ben Adam leMakom, Ben Adam leAtzmo, that the Torah recognizes the fact that there are things that help us. And there are things that help us, and that we need to be courageous. I'd say that one of the, we spoke about self-awareness. I think, we spoke about the ability to be able to have respect for other people, even if their needs are not what our needs are. The ability to be able to see other people for who they are, and not to just judge. We can fall into this trap of judging everything based off of, it's good enough for me, it must be good enough for them. But I'd say also courage, and I think it's those stories that we've heard from those tzaddikim, that they were giving courage, that once we establish what are those comforts that help us, or they help people in our family, go do them. And even if it may look funny, and someone may look at you and be like, what, suddenly this guy, now he's driving the fancy car, he was always the guy who didn't, and now suddenly, he's upgrading, he's redoing his house. Yeah, be courageous, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu believes in us, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to trust ourselves. And if something can help us, or can help other people, and that level of comfortability will help us to serve Him, That's what he wants us to do.
Amen. Beautiful. Really, really nice. Thank you.
Sure.
Shkoyach. Hashem.